Hello and welcome to Autistic Changeling. Today we have a special guest star, my mother, who is visiting, and the opportunity presented itself. So, didn't really have much of a plan for today's video, but we're going to talk and hopefully something will develop. So why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
About me?
Yes.
Let's see. I'm a Jane of all trades, master of none. I raised two amazing children to adulthood, homeschooled till middle school, late middle school. Spent a bunch of years as a potter. Now I work full-time at a hardware store. Look at the camera. Sorry. I'm just used to talking to you. Yeah, that's me in a nutshell.
Cool.
I'm quirky.
Cool.
Mm-hmm. So, yeah. I guess I had been kind of thinking about, when you asked me to do this, I was kind of thinking about you growing up and, what it was like, what the world considered an autistic individual to be when you were growing up. Mm-hmm. And I guess part of the reason that you went so long without a diagnosis and all of that kind of thing. So yeah. I don't know if you wanted me to talk a little about that, about, when you were really young, we made the decision to homeschool. Mm-hmm. And I think I still think that was the best decision you could have made. Yeah. But it allowed us to ignore the possibility that you were autistic because everything was just chalked up to quirks. Mm-hmm. All of your special interests were just chalked up to great homeschooling. It was, of course, Sam's like totally into Egyptology right now, and Sam's developed an interest in Egyptology and a passion for it, and everything is Egypt. It's King Tut this and Egyptian gods that, and not knowing anything different about special interests, we just assumed that it was, we were allowing you the opportunity to explore to your greatest extent whatever your passion was. To the point where...
Why is ancient Egypt such a popular special interest? Discuss in the comments.
Carry on. There we go. To the point where I remember taking you to an art gallery opening of an Egyptian exhibit when you were, 7, maybe? I don't remember. You were young.
Yeah.
And we get down into the tomb, and the guide says, does anybody know anything about the story behind, was it Isis and Osiris?
It was Isis and Osiris.
Isis and Osiris.
I would just like to point out, they asked.
They did ask. They made the mistake of not knowing their audience, and they did ask. And so Sam went into great detail about the history of Isis and Osiris, and probably greater detail than was required for that age group, but
conveniently omitting some of the parts of the story which I did not know because they weren't included in the children's version of the myths, which is in everybody's best interest.
Yes. Yeah. So a passion to discuss special interests, which later on we're checking off on the autism boxes. We just thought was Sam's quirky way of being. Sam and Dylan had friends.
Dylan is my brother, for anybody who isn't aware of that.
My children had friends who had an older sibling who was autistic. And this person was autistic in a way that everybody understood autism to be. They were very much in their own head, as far as what we perceive it to be, in that they did not speak. They wandered the neighborhood stimming. Now, back then, we didn't know that was what they were doing.
Quick point, I actually don't remember this person at all.
No, so. And you wouldn't have because you didn't interact with them.
Yeah, or any of our neighbors.
Yeah,
really.
And, so this person would wander the neighborhood. They never spoke. They just stimmed and wandered. And that was very much what an autistic person was thought to be back then. We didn't know all of the different ways in which autism presented itself. It really wasn't considered and I hate the word spectrum, but it really wasn't considered the far-ranging.
The word spectrum is okay, just not as a normal person to autistic person.
Right, and that's the spectrum of presentation.
As an aside, it is possible for nonverbal people to be outgoing. Not all nonverbal people are in their own heads, but you know the stereotype that my mom was talking about.
Yeah, and that's very much what I'm talking about, the stereotype. And so we never considered that you were autistic because...
Yeah, even though I did see a therapist when I was a kid.
Oh yeah, no, you've seen a number of therapists over the years, none of whom said, hey, you ever consider the possibility that your oldest child might be autistic? That was never brought up, and actually the first time I really thought about it, I think you were 10. And I had a friend, a coworker, who also has a background in early childhood development and family with not autism, but with other.
ADHD, I think.
No, her son has ADHD.
Yeah.
But her brother-in-law is he's mentally different. I'm not sure exactly what the appropriate terminology.
Probably general intellectual disability.
Yes, and she grew up. Can we cut that out?
Not sure how to do that.
Okay.
We'd have to restart from the beginning. Do you want to do that?
We don't want to do that.
Okay.
No.
Sorry, everyone.
That's okay. My first time here. I stumble. She works with children with alternate abilities. Neurodiverse. Thank you. I'm still learning the lingo. I apologize, and I mean no offense to anybody out there. And she and I had talked one day. Anyways, back to the story. She and I had talked one day, and I said something about Sam and questioned the idea. And she was like, yeah, it sounds to me like she could very easily be autistic based on our discussions. And that was the first time I'd even thought about it. But not, because it still had such a negative connotation.
Yeah.
I didn't want to say, Sam, maybe you're autistic, and have you think, I'm broken. I'm broken, I might as well just give up now, because I didn't see you, I've never seen you as broken, I've never seen you as anything that I wouldn't want to have for a child. And I didn't want a label to limit you. Because I knew you could achieve anything you wanted to. And I was afraid a label would limit you. But later on, you came to me and said you wanted the label.
Yeah.
At which point, I'm like, okay, if that's what you want and you need, let's do it.
Yeah. But see, the thing is, growing up without a label doesn't prevent you from internalizing stuff that, like, you know what I mean? I didn't have the word autistic growing up or the suspicion of it because I didn't know very much about autism. We'll discuss that in a separate video. You know exactly the special interest I'm talking about.
Yes.
But anyway, I didn't know a great deal about it, so it didn't even occur to me to look into until I was probably in college. But growing up without a label to use or to look into doesn't prevent you from feeling like there's something wrong with you. Because you don't need a word to know that there's something different about you. And honestly, I feel like, I don't know what it would have been like if I'd had the word growing up, but it's still pretty easy to feel like, if you don't have a word, not only do you know that there's something different about you, but it's also something that it feels like nobody else has.
Yeah.
And that makes it even easier to feel alone because you don't even know where to start looking. Which was kind of frustrating, but I don't know if having the word autistic attached to me growing up would have made other people more likely to be ableist toward me, because I feel like that's a thing that happens where if someone does something and they're not considered autistic, it's acceptable, but if they are considered autistic, it's not acceptable. So that's something to consider, and that shouldn't happen. But I don't know if having the word autistic would have made me feel worse about myself. Although, on the other hand, if I had been exposed to groups like Autism Speaks growing up, that would have been harmful.
Yes, yeah. It's hard to say. And like I said, after the move, you saw numerous therapists about different things, and not a single one of them began to approach the idea that autism may be even a slight part of what was going on with you.
But see, the thing is, once I did bring up being autistic to therapists, they all agreed. Yeah. It's not like these therapists thought that I wasn't autistic. It's just that it's not something that occurred to them to consider. you know?
Yeah.
Because it's not like these therapists not considering me to be autistic is evidence that I'm not. You know what I mean?
No, absolutely. Absolutely. And I think that they were remiss in not even asking me, have they had the diagnosis?
Yeah.
Has anybody approached you?
Mm-hmm.
Not one therapist pulled me aside and said, I'm wondering if Sam might be autistic. Have you had Sam tested for autism? Have you had a discussion with Sam's care provider?
Well,
has anybody broached you? And not a single therapist ever broached me with that.
Well, I think there was... Okay, so we talked about that therapist I had as a kid.
Yeah, the one who said you think too much and what a great thing that is.
Yeah, and didn't even, the word anxiety didn't even come into their mind.
Yeah.
So we've already talked about that. And then there were some therapists I saw in high school who seemed to be brushing everything off as either because of the move, which was an easy excuse for anything different about me.
Yeah.
And OCD. That one therapist talked to me for like 20 minutes and then was like, you have OCD, but I'm not going to give you any official diagnosis of this. I just want to put you on meds when you're 13 and not finished growing. And
right.
So, I don't know. I feel like...
Yeah, and OCD is not your issue.
Well, yeah, I mean, I have compulsions, but it's not because of OCD, I don't think.
Not,
I don't know. Regardless, the therapist I think that I saw, the one therapist I saw before the move was just not thinking properly about things. I don't know. And the therapist after the move, because we had moved between countries, we moved from Nova Scotia to Connecticut, for context, for anybody who doesn't know me in real life. And after we moved, because it was such a big move, it was really easy to brush off anything I was experiencing as being related to the move, even though I definitely distinctly remember trying to explain to these therapists that this wasn't the cause of everything that was different about me. They didn't really seem to understand that.
Yeah.
So I think that's a large part of why it didn't occur to them, because this was just too convenient a thing.
That's true. Yeah, that's true. I mean, everything was, and I honestly thought a lot of it.
Yeah,
even though a lot of your other issues I thought were brought on by the move, and they were, at the time, they were more pressing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so the autism thing kind of took a back story to it, because it's it wasn't
and it was difficult to pick apart the pieces,
very,
because the move did bother me, and it was difficult to pick apart the things that were because of that, and then also the fact that I still felt like there was this underlying something behind it that I couldn't get them to understand, but it wasn't the immediate thing that I was talking to them about, so it just didn't really come up.
And then going from homeschool to public school, some of the meltdowns were attributed to the fact that you just couldn't cope.
Well, I mean, some of them were, that was what caused the meltdown.
Yeah, but they, a lot of that was the teachers kind of blamed the whole homeschooling thing.
Yeah.
Because you didn't know how to be in a classroom, because, we kept you locked up in a dungeon with a Bible in one hand and a felt pen in the other, and I'm sorry. I deal with a lot of people who love to ask, but what about the socialization with homeschool? Yeah.
Lovely.
But so that's my take on it. You presented a lot of traits over the years that we just didn't pick up on, because you homeschooled. You were my oldest child.
Yep.
So I had nothing else with which to compare.
And Dylan isn't exactly
I wouldn't be surprised that he would have the same kind of a diagnosis or something similar.
Yeah.
But he doesn't care.
No.
So, you know what? He's awesome.
Yeah. Well, my point is that Dylan's not exactly a solid basis for comparison of what's abnormal.
No, exactly.
Abnormal isn't a good word. Don't use that word. I didn't mean to say that.
Yeah. And in the homeschooling community, I would say probably very few are actually truly neurotypical.
Yeah, well, I mean, if you're considering reasons why people might homeschool their kids, I think a fairly common one is because their kid isn't fitting in with a classroom or interacting with the other kids in a way that kids are supposed to, so it's easier to do it.
Exactly.
With me and why you decided to homeschool me, you could talk about that.
Yeah, Sam was always very quick to pick up on language. Mm-hmm. From the speaking at a very early age to reading at a very early age, language was always...
This is called hyperlexia, by the way, when kids understand and speak, and read. I read a lot as a kid. Mm-hmm. And being able to, put the words together and stuff, not necessarily always understanding, exactly what they mean, and just,
Yeah.
like a lot of language without necessarily like always the.
Yeah, well, you had read the entire Harry Potter series that was available at the time before you were 7.
Yeah. Yep. There's a great picture of me that I love when I was a kid, and I'm curled up on a couch with this Harry Potter book that's like almost bigger than my head.
Yeah. Yeah, you know, so when you were really young, I had already been considering homeschooling.
Yeah.
Part of it for me, honestly, I was bullied in school, and I didn't want you being bullied.
Yeah.
You know, you become very protective when you're, when you're gestating and raising a child, but it became clear that you were progressing in some ways faster than your peer group. So we put you into a program at the local school, 2 afternoons a week. It was called Fun with Force, and it was a chance for 4-year-olds to get to know their peer group before being in school all the time, play games, and that was the premise. The truth is that the person running the program was expected to split these students into 2 groups.
Oh.
In order to divide them up into 2 classrooms. So, those who were considered special needs or slower learners would go into one group, and the others would go into the other group. So, Sam was hanging out with these people 2 afternoons a week, and I explored the school, and I really didn't like what I saw in the school itself, and that made me nervous. Sam didn't seem to quite connect with the rest of the group.
Yeah, I don't remember making any friends.
No, you really didn't. You didn't really connect with the rest of the group. And you seemed to have a grasp on certain things that the rest of the group didn't, and that made me a little nervous about how you were going to get along in the classroom. And then we went to the parents' night. Your father and I went to the parents' night.
Yeah.
And one teacher basically said, we're basically babysitters for your primary students.
That's nice.
They had no organizational skills whatsoever, the teachers. The meeting was so poorly organized. We walked out of there and your father said, okay, let's look at this homeschooling thing. And so that was it. We decided that we were going to homeschool. You were very, very, very talkative.
Yeah.
You asked a gazillion questions a day.
Yeah.
And your brain went into places where most 7-year-olds weren't yet going, and you weren't even 5.
Yeah.
And I just couldn't see you sitting in a regular classroom and being focused, being content.
Yeah.
I didn't think a regular classroom was going to be the right place for you, and I honestly, we were looking at 2 classes. One had 33 students.
Oh.
For primary. The other only had 29, but it had 3 special needs students with handlers, with
assistant.
Assistants.
There's a word for this.
Yes. A handler was what we called them back then. It's a nasty term.
That's
it is.
Really inappropriate.
It is.
And dehumanizing.
Yes, it is. But that was the term back then. And one of those students had been in the Fun with Fours, and I had seen the way this student would disrupt the group and how little help his assistant was.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking, there's no way Sam can get a proper education in a chaotic environment such as that.
Yeah, so it looks like they weren't really doing a whole lot for the students who actually needed accommodations either. I mean,
they weren't. No.
Doesn't sound like a great school system.
No, you dropped 3 students with special needs into a classroom with 26 other students.
Yeah.
It's not a great situation. So we decided that homeschooling was going to be the right path for you. Where you could set up your museums.
I used to collect random items like rocks and, I don't know, twigs and bits of plants and whatever, and organize them in my room, which in retrospect is a very autistic trait. And then I would get Mom and Dad to come and tour my museum, and to Mom it basically just looked like clutter, because that's basically what it was.
Yeah,
and she had to try really hard to pretend to like it.
Well, I mean, I wanted to support all of your endeavors.
And the dead bugs. Don't forget the dead bugs.
Oh, yes. Yeah, but...
The dead bugs were cool.
The dead bugs were cool, but you also, for your 5th birthday, handed me your birthday money and said, buy me a microscope.
I did, yes.
So we looked at a lot of bug wings and snake skins, and we looked at a lot of different stuff. I with a microscope.
Yeah.
I mean, most 5-year-olds aren't asking for a microscope for their birthday. They're asking for the latest My Little Pony iPad game.
I don't think that's a thing.
Okay, well, when you were 5, My Little Pony was a thing, and
Well,
these
I know
days
that.
iPad games are a thing.
Okay.
So, yeah, but yeah. So that's my take on it. I'm glad I did not get involved with Autism Speaks.
Me too.
You know, I originally assumed that they were a great organization until Sam educated me on their true purpose in life, which I don't agree with, because I don't look at my child and think they need to change. I look at my child and I think the world needs to change.
Mm-hmm.
The world needs to stop assuming that we all fit into the one cookie cutter.
Yeah.
And that's a homeschooler thing too, because in homeschooling we don't have a cookie cutter.
Yeah.
We just roll the dough out and let it do what it wants.
Yeah. I'll probably put a link spam in the subject description about why Autism Speaks sucks, because I don't feel like going into it in great depth in this video. But I'll put a link spam below. So,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So.
Yeah. It's probably been long enough that we shouldn't continue talking a great deal. So
Well, thanks for having me on the show, Sam. That was a lot of fun. I enjoyed it.
Thank you. Thanks for watching, and have a great day. And also, because I constantly forget to do this when I'm watching videos, I'm going to remind you, if you like this video, click the thumbs up. And if you want to see more, you can hit subscribe. This is not an obligation, but just in case you're like me and you forget, you can do that. Have a great day.